Hello, everyone. Welcome to our FindSpark event. So we have a chat here in this platform. So if everyone could just give a quick hello, that would be wonderful. If you could hear me, just give a quick hello in the chat box. All right. And now we are so excited to be here. First of all, kudos to you for being here at a professional development event on a Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. But trust me, you have made the right spot or right choice in where you're spending your time. So we love hosting these events, not just for you to learn incredible things and get great information, but also so you can connect with other FindSpark members. So as we kick off, it would be great if everybody would share a quick introduction. I appreciate you sharing the hello as well. So take it to the next level and share your background, where you're tuning in from, and a link where we can learn more about you. So a LinkedIn or personal website. And I always also like to take a really quick poll for who is this your first time FindSpark event and who is a returner. So if you're a first timer, you can chat first timer. If you're a returner, you can chat returner. It's always fun to get a sense of the mix of the room, returners and first timers, usually a pretty even mix of both. All right, great. Looks like always, we got a nice mix, new folks and familiar faces. So share your intro at some point throughout the chat. And this is Emily Missner here speaking right now. I'm the founder and CEO of FindSpark. We are so excited to be here with Jemia Young of TEKsystems, a longtime FindSpark employer partner that has hired numerous FindSpark community members through our job board and through our events like Hustle Summit. Jemia has been our partner since literally day one. And we're so thrilled that she's presenting this workshop on emotional vulnerability, the secret to doing well at work. This is an encore presentation because Jemia presented this earlier at one of our in-person events called Rising Closers, which is a diversity sales career conference. And it was the top-rated session at that conference. People responded so well to it. It's such a unique but important topic. So we couldn't be more thrilled to have Jemia here with you leading this live. We will be recording and have the slides, but lucky for you being here in person, Jemia will be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions throughout the event, you can chat them and we'll be here moderating them and making sure Jemia sees them at the end. And you can also ask them when we get towards the end as well. So we're so excited to be here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jemia so we can get started.
All right, I think I have everything on. Can everyone hear me okay? Just a couple of yeses, that'd be great. Awesome. Well, good evening, FindSparkers. I love to say that term. It's my favorite way to describe the community is by saying FindSparkers. I'm very excited to take you all through a topic that I am very passionate about, which is emotional vulnerability. Just as a quick, just some housekeeping, I have two screens kind of going on here. So you guys see me maybe looking to the left or to the right, just because I may be just checking out one of my other screens. And that's just wanted to give you some quick housekeeping. But before we dive into it, I would love to share a little bit more of who I am. So again, hello, my name is Jemia. I am from the Washington, D.C. area, specifically Northern Virginia. So I'm in Arlington. I saw a couple of D.C. people in the chat there. And I saw someone actually from George Mason. Surprisingly, my fiance actually worked at George Mason. So look at the small world here. Love that. I am a recent graduate from a D&I program at Georgetown. I just recently finished my program in February. I also have my undergraduate degree from East Carolina in public relations. And then I got my MBA from the University of Phoenix. I've been working for TEKsystems for about 6 years now. 6 years to the date. So this is my 6-year anniversary. So yay, go me. And some of my hobbies are blogging, books, and brunch. If you're a DC person, know anything about the DMV, you know we are serious brunchers. All right. So I know social is a big way a lot of us connect. I did just find out that Instagram may be down, but there's still time. I want you all to get social with me throughout this presentation. So tag Tech Careers on Twitter or Instagram, mention us in your story, DM your favorite tip or trick. Make sure you do all this before 3 p.m. tomorrow. I am giving away 3 Amazon gift cards. So who does not love Amazon? So giving 3 away. If you are someone that has a private profile, still feel free to share it on your story. Just make sure you screenshot that share and then send a DM to us on Instagram, because I will not be able to see private Instagram stories. On the Instagram kick, whenever it gets back up, make sure you follow us. This is a great way to learn a little bit more about our culture and who we are. And then lastly, as Emily has mentioned, we've hired a lot of people from the community. Recently, we've hired 3 summer interns from the FindSpark community that are going to be joining us. We still have a couple of summer internships left, so you can check the website, but we are also actively interviewing for our full-time roles, our roles for May graduates, as well as December graduates. So we have plenty of opportunity available for everybody. So are we ready to hop into things? Yeah? All right, let's hop into it. So what is tonight all about? We're going to talk about why it's important to be vulnerable, how to share your story authentically at work, why being yourself at work is probably the most important thing you need to do, and then how you're going to use emotional vulnerability to combat bias. I'm probably going to mess that word up a lot of times tonight. It's like a tongue tie. But yes, how to use emotional vulnerability to combat bias. So let's start with a definition here. Vulnerability, the quality or state of being exposed when you feel like you could potentially being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. So for this context, we're absolutely talking about emotionally, but I wanted to give you the full definition from the dictionary. But then if you take it a step further and look at emotional vulnerability, it's not a term you can just search on dictionary.com for, and it's more of a concept. But my pal, I like to say my pal, but Brene Brown sums it up in this beautiful quote here. It's about showing up and being seen. It's tough to do when you're terrified of what people may see or think. And I owe a lot of this knowledge and just me being comfortable in emotional vulnerability to, as mentioned, I like books. Daring Greatly is written by Brene Brown. For anyone that has not read this, it's a really, really, really great book, and it takes you on a journey of how you can use courage in emotional vulnerability throughout your entire life. So really great pickup there. But let's start a little bit easy. So we're going to go through the power of emotion. So what does this mean? So emotions can get the best of us. They can also help us strive in our lives as well as in our careers. But when it's used correctly, you can build connections through really these 3 main things. There's much more to it, but it's really these 3 main things. So relatability, trust, and authenticity. So let's break this down even further. Relatability. So what makes a good role model? Perfection or relatability? What would you say? Feel free to chat something in the box if you're open to it. But I'm pretty sure a lot of you are going to say relatability. Someone who is a role model is much more relatable if they've worked hard to achieve their success than someone that appears to be perfect and they're kind of like untouchable or they would never do any wrong. Trust. This is a great quote from a sports psychologist, but it talks about, when a leader or someone who's in charge, when they're open and they say, hey, I'm human and I make mistakes like you, it empowers the group. Now you probably trust that person a lot more than you probably have ever trusted that individual in the first place. When someone opens up who they really are, they humanize the situation, you start to relate with them. You really start to relate with them on a deeper level. My favorite, though, out of all 3 of those words is authenticity. Such a great picture. Yay. But authenticity is in every single part of being vulnerable. It's about showing how raw and how real you are. It's owning your challenges, your failures, your wins, and your successes. So it's a journey of the unknown. When you start to open up to people, you start to think, like, how are they going to take what I'm saying? You start traveling down this path. As you can see the image, you start traveling down this path to the unknown. You don't know, hey, after I share, once I hit this curve and I share something, how they're going to feel afterwards. Like, you're probably nervous. Like, you're like, I don't really know where this is going to go. And you probably don't want to be emotional either. But unfortunately, we're just emotional beings. There's no getting out of the emotional side of sharing your story and opening up and being vulnerable. There's no emotions and vulnerable just go hand in hand. There's no way they cannot go with each other. And so the next question is, so how do you start the journey, right? How do you start this journey of becoming emotionally vulnerable, sharing your story with others, and using it in your superpower and all throughout life? But specifically sharing it in the workplace, whether it's your internship or maybe you're on an e-board in the community or maybe at school. But I'm going to start to take you through how you can use this in your career journey. So simply, we're going to start here, almost at the very beginning, interviews. So this doesn't just mean interviews for a new opportunity. This also means interviews for things in your office. Maybe you're shooting for a promotion. Maybe you are, trying to start an employee resource group, or sometimes they're called business resource groups or affinity groups, and you have to interview to get the job. Maybe you're trying to get a stretch assignment. So when you think of interviews, don't always just think new job, new opportunity, first thing. Interviews can happen in several different settings. But here, let your interviewer in on who you are. So this means things that are just outside of your name, where you went to school, your major, and your professional experience. I'm sure everybody gets the question when they're interviewing. So tell me about yourself. And what do we typically do? Oh, my name is Jemia. I am a 2008 graduate from East Carolina University. For the last 6 years, I've been working at that. That's really not who I am. I'm much more than that. But if you're stuck on trying to figure out how to, share a little bit more of who you are, think about the whys. So share your whys. So why did you choose that university? Why did you choose that major? Why did you change majors a couple of times? Why are you going through a career change? What's that moving and that motivation factor behind all of that? That is where you start to dig in a little bit deeper with the person you're sitting across the table from. And also you want to make sure that you own up, to some of the challenges and the mistakes that you've had throughout your entire educational and your career background. When you're doing these things, you're opening up and showing the person you're sitting across the table from, you're showing them that you're human, you're authentic, and you're being vulnerable. Instead of sticking to those textbook answers for certain things, you're basically answering in black and white. Put a little gray in there, maybe a little red, maybe a little blue, a little pink, a little orange, but put some color to your responses. Open up. The one thing I love about the last bullet here, the own your mistakes, I think one of the most fantastic answers that you can give to a mistakes related question is something that you still have open-ended. So we often like to explain the questions and answer the questions with something we've already accomplished. But what about the things you're still trying to figure out? That's a great way to be vulnerable. And you can also use this in your current setting. So whether it's your one-on-one feedback sessions with your boss or your leader, I would just say, hey, change the word in your mind, like interviewer, change it around to say boss, peer, leader. And if you do that, you're going to build deeper connections. You're going to go beyond surface level. I'm sure you guys have probably heard the theme, like getting jobs, getting internships, getting opportunities, moving up. It's not just about what's on your resume. It's about the connections that you have. What are people saying about you when you're not in the room? Can someone really talk about who you are, or are they just going to rattle off your accolades? You'll get more richer and more genuine feedback. When you start to open up and be vulnerable with others, they're going to know now why you're fighting for what you're fighting for. They're going to understand now why you're having those early mornings and those late nights, or why you're frustrated on why certain things aren't working. Or maybe they're going to understand now why you made this huge shift in your career to move a different way when you were on a path to go this way. And if you do that by sharing your story and who you are, it also creates exposure, because now you're sharing with someone that they may, in their mind, they may pop, like a name may pop in their head, and they may say, hey, I know someone that's been in a similar situation as this. Let me connect A to B. And what does that do? That creates opportunities. So now you have people advocating for you just based off of you sharing who you are. So you're really not sometimes even talking about your accolades at work and the great things that you've done. Maybe you're sharing some of the things in your life that you've struggled with. You are probably sharing some things at work that you've been challenged with and how you've overcome those, but you're even just taking it a step further and you're saying, hey, I probably was in this space at this particular time, because I had this going on at work as well as maybe this going on in my home life. But we're often very, very, very shy to share things that don't really have the work related tag on them. And sometimes we don't really know how to even get those conversations started. So I'm going to share with you something that we just started doing at my organization, and it is called the Journey Line. And it is probably one of my favorite things to go through. Fix my headset here. So the Journey Line. This is what the Journey Line is. So the Journey Line is an illustration, and it basically takes people through a path of where you came from to where you are today. And it takes you through the things that shaped you, that's molded you, that's influenced you, and things that you have overcome. So once you do this, you're inviting someone into yourself, into your life. Journey lines can be done on a personal level. So you can take this through and kind of map it out from a personal standpoint. But you can also map it out through just things that happen to you over your career. So it can be kind of a career journey line, or you can mix the two together. This is in a very, very, very emotionally vulnerable exercise where you're going to see how this creates connection. So what am I going to do? I'm going to share some of my journey line with you all. So here we go. Childhood is good at an early age, right? I was born. I don't really know too much. At the age of 4, my parents divorced. At 4, you really don't know kind of what that really looks like, but I knew things were a little bit different. Between the ages 5 and 10, I have actually always been involved in beauty pageants, but it was really significant for me at that time because it really brought my family unit together to help me with my confidence. And now I had both my mom and my dad in kind of in the same area. We're spending a lot of time with each other. But then at age 11, my mom moved me to Phoenix, completely different side of the world. I'm from Baltimore, had always been in this on this side of the on the East Coast. Now I'm in a completely different climate. Away from all my friends, away from my father, my family. Martin Luther King Day wasn't even a holiday when I moved to Phoenix, actually. And so it was a completely different culture that I was used to. But every summer I spent with my dad, it was awesome. Like that, like it was probably some of the highest moments I've had in my early childhood years. But at the age of 15, my dad passed away from brain cancer. One of my lowest moments in my life. It was so hard for me to get through that, especially as a young woman kind of blossoming into figuring out myself in my way. Fast forward a couple years, I got accepted to Arizona State. So great, going to college, very excited. But then my junior year, I dropped out, actually. I drove across the country by myself on a solo mission to North Carolina to chase a boyfriend. And then I enrolled at East Carolina University. So a lot of emotions kind of going on right here. Then in 2007, the person I drove for, we ended up breaking up. So now I'm kind of below my energy line. So I'm more in the negative side of things. Like I'm feeling like, oh goodness, like what did I just do? But as 2007 progressed and into 2008, I began to love my college. And then I graduated and then I moved to Atlanta, kind of followed the trend of people at my school and moved down to down south, basically. It took me 6 months to find a job. 6 months after graduation to find a job. I thought like, hey, I have a college degree. Why isn't anybody hiring me? I did not know that it requires much, much more than showing up with a college degree. I really wish Fine Sparkle was around then. It totally would have helped me out. But then I got a job. So I worked at Verizon Wireless for 4.5 years. And in that time, my emotional journey was up and down. So it was definitely had some highs and I had some lows. For the most part, I was probably right about there. I didn't love what I did, but it was a paycheck. And I was right out of college. It gave me a little bit of flexibility. And I worked with technology. I always got to get the new phones. So it was pretty good for me. But then I ended a really unhealthy relationship and it put me in a bad spot. And I really didn't know what to do. I was questioning, do I want to work here anymore? Do I want to figure out what's going on? I was kind of in a rut during that particular point in time. But 3 years later, I found TEKsystems. So I obviously worked through my challenges over the next 3 years with Verizon, but then 6 years to the date, March 13th, I actually joined TEKsystems in 2013. And I really felt I hit a career moment. I was like, okay, I am somewhere where I feel like I can actually grow and thrive. But it happened again. I ended yet another relationship and I started struggling with confidence just personally as well as at work. So I started to bring my home life to work just on my back, on my back, just baggage. And I just didn't know how to talk to my peers or my leaders or my boss to really explain to them what was going on internally with me and why was it affecting my performance. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't aware of emotional vulnerability and how to actually share this and how it was infecting me and the impact of something like that on me. At the end of 2014, though, I got promoted. I started to open up. I started to express my whys. I started to figure out, what my purpose and what my passion was. And this was I think this was actually my second promotion at TEKsystems. And then I always had a goal to move back to the DMV area. So for those that don't know, that DMV is DC, Maryland, Virginia. And I always had a goal to move back. And the company, that was probably one of my biggest career moves that I really wanted to do, was get back to this area. And I was awarded the opportunity to do that. So that was really great. And I hadn't lived in this area as an adult. I left this area when I was 11 years old. So I hadn't lived here as an adult. So I started to struggle with confidence just in myself of like, okay, I'm in a new city. I was in Atlanta for 8 years. Of course, I had friends that I was friends with for over 15 years that lived in this area, but they were also in different areas and phases within their life. I was in a new office environment. I went from really a great, rich culture in my Atlanta office with TEKsystems to an office in Northern Virginia that was great, but it was just different. I didn't know those individuals, so I had to get to know them. So I was on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster at that time. But then I moved on to the diversity team. I landed what I felt was like my dream job with the organization, and I moved on to the diversity team, and I'm in the role that I have now. And finally, I got it work. I got something to work. So I got engaged last year in 2018. I met my fiance actually on Tinder. But it was a very high moment for myself. And I felt like, okay, hey, like things are going really great for me. I was in a really great spot emotionally. But as you see, there's a little arrow. It's very faint, but it's a little arrow there. And that means my journey is going to continue. So my journey is going to keep going, where there's going to be ups and downs, but my journey is going to keep going on as I progress in life. And I actually condensed my journey line for you all here. I kind of went through it very quickly for the sake of time, but you can see I could spend like at least probably 2 to 3 minutes, almost every single box here, and talking a little bit more in detail. And there's actually a rule to the journey line exercise. When you're sharing this, because it's often shared in pairs, the person you're sharing with, they can't say anything. There's no questions. There's no asking for more clarifications. There's no saying, hey, I can relate to that. That person is just listening to you. And then when you're done, that's when you have some dialogue. Typically, when you're sharing your journey line, it lasts for about 15 minutes per partner. But let me ask you this. Now that I've finished sharing my journey with everyone, let's ask these couple of questions. Who can relate to me now? Do you feel more comfortable sharing with me? And then how much more trust did you just give me by listening to my story? Just by sharing a little bit more of who I am, I create a deeper connection with everybody. And we're not even in the same room. Now imagine if you did this at work. You probably would feel a little like this afterwards. You feel a little shocked, probably confused and a little vulnerable. You probably don't think like, how is the other person thinking of what I just shared? I'm thinking that right now. Like, I wonder what people are thinking now that I'm sharing my story. They probably didn't expect that as they're coming into this workshop this evening. But really, you should feel like this, like you're killing it, because you just overcame a huge hurdle. You opened up and shared your story with someone, and you probably shared it with someone that you may not have a strong connection with, or you shared it with someone who you have a strong connection with, but now you guys are even deeper than where you were before. And guess what? You did something else. Yes, I'm on a Bitmoji roll. I totally am. But you helped eliminate any bias that someone may have by opening up and being your authentic self. So when you open up authentically and let people in, you're removing some of the assumptions that someone may have for you. So maybe someone doesn't understand why you're doing the things that you're doing in the work atmosphere or the work environment, or why you're striving for more, or where you're saying, hey, I have too much right now on my plate. We've all been those times where we've all been in those situations to where, maybe someone has asked us to do a little bit more, but we know emotionally at that moment, we don't have any more to give. And sometimes we don't understand how to communicate how we don't have any more to give. And if you were sharing your journey line with maybe say like your manager, they probably could pinpoint a time based off of your journey line when your performance really reflected like, hey, I noticed this. When was this time frame? I actually noticed, and I remember that during that time frame, you were a little off at work. now this kind of makes sense with me understanding a little bit more about you. But also, when you're sharing and opening up, what you're not doing is you're not covering. So this word covering, this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about here. So what is covering? I'm going to read to you a definition. It's a strategy in which individuals manage to downplay their differences. They tone down or push an element of who they are into the background in effort to be more accepted through cultural or environmental norms. And the impact of covering is reflected in the amount of energy that is directed towards the inauthentic behavior that can affect performance. Some deep stuff here, right? Totally deep stuff. So now can you see how being emotionally vulnerable can help combat bias? Because when you're being emotionally vulnerable, you're opening up about your differences, who you are, your background, things that are important from you, your own personal norms, your cultural norms, the environmental norms that you have. Imagine having to go through every single day, and when you drive to work and you're putting on this mask and you're zipping up a new suit of armor, and you're in your car or you're on the train and you're going to work every single day, and you're just like, oh, I know when I go into work, this is something that I can't do. I can't say this. I can't do that. I can't show up and be myself. I feel like I can't tell my boss this. My peer is going to ask me why I didn't finish this assignment. And I don't know how to explain to them why I haven't. I'm going to make up some grand lie or some grand white lie or some reason why I haven't been able to finish what I said. So it's really important that people start to understand, when you're covering some things of who you are, it's not just about an exterior. It's even about some of the things that you're dealing with and just internally with yourself. A lot of it has to do with just making sure you're in a great mental health space. So if you're not sold, so if you're sitting over there thinking like, I probably don't cover anything. Let's go a little bit further here. So these are the axis of covering. There's 4 different buckets that we're going to talk about, but there's probably much more that we can go through. But let's run through these here. The percentages at the bottom, that shows you how many, this is now the workforce, how many people in the workforce are actually covering. So appearance, 60% of people working right now are covering something. So what's their self-presentation? It's grooming, attire, mannerisms. Now don't get this confused with professionalism, but we'll get to that in a second. Affiliations. So things that you're affiliated with. So your identity, it could be culture, it could be your group. Things like this. I know recently in the last few weeks, Ash Wednesday was around. Someone could say, hey, I don't feel comfortable leaving the office and coming back with ashes on my head in fear of what someone else may say. Or maybe you're fasting at the moment, whether it's personal or it's from a religious background. And now you don't feel like answering or telling someone why you're fasting. That's something that's there. Things that you advocate for, this is one can get really, really, really challenging for people. This is the line where you could kind of teeter social justice things that are happening, in America for the most part. But one of the best examples I love to give here is to utilize the LGBTQ community. So maybe you're someone that's a very strong ally for various reasons, but maybe you're interacting with someone that has very opposing views than you. And it could be a client that you're trying to get business from. It could be someone you're trying to build a relationship at work. It could be your boss. And now you don't understand how to be your authentic self or to share some of who you are because of their views. So now you're just kind of covering up and you're just kind of shaking your head, or you're just not saying anything at all. And you're probably feeling a certain type of way inside. And then the last one, association. 73% of people don't really like to associate with people that they identify with in the workplace. So let me give you a quick story. So I was visiting an office probably about 4 years ago. And I walked in and I've done this plenty of times. And it's more of a joke on my side, but I walked in and I saw a group of Black men and women all huddled in the middle of the office. And so I walked up really quickly. I knew just about everybody in the group. And I said, hey guys, disperse, move away. And that's me like covering, saying like, hey, like we all can't be with each other, or someone's going to say something. And in that moment, when I did that, at that very moment I did that, I said, hey, why did I do that? Why did I tell people that are building connections, that are building relationships? Why did I tell them to move? And why did everybody do it? Everyone's like, they kind of agreed with me. Like, oh yeah. Let's go our separate ways. Let's break out into smaller groups. 73% of people feel this way, that they avoid associating with individuals in their own identity group. So you see, like, this is detrimental to a person. As you see the question at the bottom, hey, is covering detrimental to a person? Absolutely it is. All of this takes vulnerability. When you kind of reveal these parts of who you are, it takes a lot of courage and emotions to actually come forward and say something. But again, let's not get confused between the lines between professionalism and actually covering. So I want to hit on that really quickly. So adaptation versus covering. So adaptation, things like dress policy, speaking your business norms, being involved in ERG groups. That's more things of like what being adaptive to your environment is. And covering, not wearing your natural hair. If you were to Google unprofessional hairstyles, more than likely hair that looks very similar to mine is going to pop up. I started TEKsystems with straight hair, chemically straighted, using a flat iron, straighten my hair. And then one day I just said, hey, I want to wear my natural hair. I hid in my office for about a good week. And if someone wanted to meet me or say, hey, come out, we call it the pit, come out into the pit, like sit out here. Like you haven't sat out here with us in a while. You're always in your office. I would say, I would send my email back. Oh, I have so many meetings today. I'll be out there tomorrow. But then when I went out there tomorrow, I made sure my hair was tied back. It was in twists and put in a bun. So no one could really tell that it was in its natural state. So like, that's what covering is. And I would go home every day and think like, oh man, gotta get up, gotta straighten my hair. I gotta wrap my hair. I gotta do all these different things with myself in order to feel like I fit in somewhere. And it was really like, it was a toll on me. And it took a lot of courage and vulnerability for me, one, to step outside my office, but then for me also to just kind of say, hey, this is me and this is who I am. So I want to make sure that you guys understand the differences between adapting to the environment and kind of getting on the professional norms. Professional polish is kind of like a term that we like to use sometimes, versus covering. But now you have knowledge on emotional vulnerability. Let's kind of switch gears back to kind of the conversations that you may have in the workplace or even interviews. I'm sure everyone's been asked this question before. I totally have. And I'm sure that this is a hard question to answer. We can go back to textbook. We can go back to black and white answers here. We can absolutely do that. But why not answer this question with a little bit more authenticity, a little bit more vulnerability? Why not take this a step further just by giving, and not just give the person what they're trying to hear, give them a little bit more of who you are. Give them way more of that. So talk about things like this. Talk about failure. And don't just talk about failure from oh, woe is me. Like I'm crying, cry me a river, feel sorry for me. Talk about failure from a standpoint, obviously, of what you've learned from it. As I mentioned earlier, maybe some of the things that you're still trying to figure out. Maybe someone that you were able to help and mentor along the way due to your failure. But then also talk about what contributed, like what your part was to that failure. Was there something going on in your home life or your personal life, or things that were happening in work outside of the projects that you were working on that contributed to this? Take ownership to that and talk about how you fought through that. Oop, my clicker here. Difficult relationships. So this does not mean a significant other, although it could be, as you saw, I shared on my journey line, because those moments really impacted me. And if I was to actually take the allotted 15 minutes to share that with you, you would understand why those really impacted me. But talk about, the time where you and your leader or your boss didn't quite see eye to eye, or you were paired with a mentor and you weren't getting enough and you had to give that person feedback. You had to coach up. Coaching up is really hard. So talking about those time periods, or you had a very difficult boss, or you had someone working in your team project, school project on the e-board, talking about the difficult relationship and how you were able to connect with that individual, how you're able to build that common connection with them, how you're able to take it from maybe surface level to maybe the level 2 relationship. It's really important to really talk about times where you weren't a great team player yourself, but then also how you made the team great. And then the other one, you could not solve a problem. This is a really, really, really great way to answer that kind of how do you overcome a challenge question when you couldn't figure it out. We oftentimes love to talk about when we figured it all out. Well, why are we not talking about when we couldn't solve a problem? How we had to call in reinforcements or ask for help or phone a friend, or why we struggled to get to the end result. Why are we not talking about our journey through that and what you learned through that time where you weren't able to solve a problem? There's some really, really, really great stories in there. And then my last one here, when you miss a step, when you tried to cut that corner a little bit, when you tried to say, hey, I know I can get to step B or step C quicker. I'm just going to go from A to C. And then by you skipping B, you actually miss a very important part. So yes, you're sharing how you may have completed the project, but there was a little bump in the road. So oftentimes our kind of beginning to end project plans, they may actually, the end result may work, but there was probably some hiccups in between the two. So instead of just talking about the wonderful things, at the end, talk about the hustle and the challenge and the grit that you went through to get to that end result. I'm telling you all a lot about kind of the negative things because vulnerability requires a lot. It requires you talking about things you're not comfortable with. And no one's really comfortable talking about things that are more on the negative side. We often like to be like, oh yes, like, this was great. It took me this, but then I got to here. I got to, be because I did all these things. But we don't talk about that journey that gets us there, all the ups and downs that we did to get to that high point. We like to end on that high point, but we never share what happens in the middle. And let's not forget, we are our own biggest inner critic. Oh, book break. So there's another great book by Susan Brady. And actually one of my mentors who works for TEKsystems actually was featured in this book. And it's about mastering your inner critic. Emily, this could probably be a completely different webinar one day. But really, really, really great book. But we are our biggest inner critic. When we're trying to be, something, that's appeasing to others, or we're trying to get ahead in our career, we're always, always, always harder on ourselves than what other people are. I'm sure when you all go through employee evaluations or self-evaluations, you probably rate yourself much lower than your manager probably does. I, for one, am very guilty of that. So just make sure, when you are being vulnerable, you're going to get that inner critic feeling, but you need to just you need to ease up off yourself. It's going to be okay. You need to be uncomfortable in that moment in that moment. So let's get to some helpful tips. As you can see, I love Bitmojis. So start small. So don't go large. Like, don't try and build this grand journey line and bring in everybody and say, hey, let's do all this, let's share. That's a very vulnerable exercise. Start small. Maybe share something with maybe one of your closest peers at work. Share a little bit of something of who you are with them. Maybe take them through your journey line. You can do that. Be okay with being uncomfortable. You can do that by starting with people that you are comfortable with and sharing something with them that you are uncomfortable with. An easy way to do that. These first two really go hand in hand. Start small and be okay with being uncomfortable. Practice and prepare. So I probably talked to myself for this webinar maybe about 3 or 4 times before I am sharing it with you all. So practice is extremely important. You need to prepare. If this is your first time being vulnerable with anybody at work, you can't just go into it with no plan. You've got to prepare to talk about how you're going to kind of answer potential questions and how you're going to share parts of your journey and share your why. You need to be prepared for that. And then lastly, encourage others. This emotional vulnerability journey is very lonesome by itself, but you have other people that are there willing to go with you, willing to take on the journey with you. That is really when it's going to catch steam and you'll start to feel empowered. You'll start to feel much, much, much better about what you're doing. And you're going to see some results. You're going to see your relationships get deeper. You're going to see doors open up for you. You're going to see the connections that are going to be made. And really, people are going to start to sponsor and advocate for you because they're going to know more about who you are as an individual versus just your rap sheet, just about your accolades. And anyone can be number one sales rep. Anyone can be the top performer, but not everybody can be emotionally open and really share and be vulnerable with individuals. So that's all I got for everybody. Again, make sure you get social with me. I am going to be giving away 3 Amazon gift cards. Make sure you tweet your favorite tweet or Instagram, your favorite tip or trick before 3 p.m. tomorrow. On Friday, I will be giving away 3 Amazon gift cards. They're e-cards, so you'll get them instantly. If anyone is interested in the journey line, I actually have a template that I can email to you that shows you how to build this journey line and gives you a little bit more detail behind it to set up the conversation with you and whoever you want to show. And this is all my contact information. So if you want to connect, obviously, with TEKsystems, Tech Careers, if you would love to connect with me on Instagram, you can follow me at District Valley. That's my blog. And so I share a lot of my blogs there and some tips. You can connect with me on Twitter. on LinkedIn too as well. And then my digital business card is that final kind of block here at the bottom. So if you text Jemia Y to 444-999, you can put your name and your email there. Then we can set up a time if you would like to talk, if you want to talk about this topic in a little bit more detail, get some information on opportunities with us, or you want some more information on the journey line. I'd be glad to connect with you. So that's all I got for everyone. Em, I'm going to turn it back over to you for questions. Em, are you there? I can't hear you. Okay, I see your, Philip, I see your message here. I will email you the journey line template. I'm taking a picture of the screen right now. Boom, got that. Oh, I hear you.
All right. Huge virtual round of applause, everyone, for Jemia. It's so wonderful. And we can certainly share that journey line template with folks via email as well, if you'd like, Jemia. So yes, we did get a couple of questions here. So one person asked, and this was around, I believe, when you're talking about, not covering. So they asked, how can you do this safely in a seemingly non-inclusive work culture environment?
So one, you kind of have to find an ally. So you have to find someone that, and they may not be an ally in the specific area that you're trying to uncover, but you have to connect with someone who you have like a relationship with, who you can easily share a little bit of your story with. Or maybe you find out that they're covering something else. So the best way is to find someone that you can connect to on a more of an emotional vulnerability level, and then share a little bit with them. And then see kind of how their response is. Kind of going back to the start small. It's really, really, really hard. I'm not going to lie, to open up in an environment that's not inclusive. It's no secret sauce to that at all. But someone has to make the change. Someone has to carry the torch. Someone has to be the pioneer. But that's not the environment where you would probably sit on the bleachers and just kind of, share your story with everyone. You need to start small and then ask that person, hey, when I share that with you, how did that impact you? And then take their feedback and their response and then use that to maybe empower someone else. So that would be my answer to that question. Hopefully that helps.
And we have another question. Can you talk more about defining your why, how to explore vulnerability within yourself before sharing it with other people? Like you mentioned, practicing and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I love to, I actually do the why kind of presentation at a lot of college campuses. And what I do is I say an easy way to start defining your why, you can take your resume or your LinkedIn profile, and ask why out of every single thing on your resume or your profile. Why did you go to that school? Why did you choose that major? Why did you pick that class? Obviously, some of them you have to pick. Why were you attracted to this job? Why did you stay there this long? Why did you decide to, move up in the role? Everything is about why. Because if you keep digging, you're going to find out more and more and more of your passions and discovering more so of why you're doing the things that you're doing. So you have to start somewhere. And the easiest way to do it is just take out your resume. And then you're probably going to have about 20 to 25 different whys throughout your entire resume. Hopefully that helps.
We have a bit of a comment here, but for those struggling with, so they say, I've seen people use others' vulnerability against them in the workplace. So they're feeling conflicted.
So one more time, I broke up just a little bit.
This person says, I've seen people use others' vulnerability against them in the workplace. So they feel conflicted.
Yeah, that's tough. Everyone's environment's not going to be welcoming to someone being very vulnerable. And then that's when you kind of have to be in a spot to say, hey, is this place, organization, team, is it ready for me? Can I be myself every single day here and be happy? Because if you feel, if you're sharing who you are authentically and it's not being perceived very well, you're probably not performing really, really well at work. So that could be a time where you may have to think like what's really more important for yourself is to be authentically who you are, um, or where you're kind of currently working on, whether it's a team, whether it is an overarching organization. Now, please don't take this as like, hey, everyone jump the ship and go find a new job. That absolutely doesn't mean that. You could be the person that can try and make a change, thinking about things like employee resource groups, business resource groups. Every single organization, at least major organizations, have confidential employee hotlines that can help you, talk through some challenging situations or environments that you're in. They can give you some kind of tools or resources. But yeah, it is very hard to start to, if someone starts to turn their vulnerability on you. But then the other thing is like, you should definitely share that with the leader or whoever is running that team or that office. Speak up, share your voice. One thing that's really challenging, and I see it sometimes even in my environment, people feel like they can't say anything, and they're in the fear of what the person's gonna what's gonna come back to them. Am I gonna be perceived as weak now? Am I gonna be perceived as someone that's tattling, or complaining? And the answer is no. If you kind of phrase your situation on intent versus impact versus like feelings, it kind of hits home a little bit more versus saying, hey, I understand maybe what you're saying, and you talk a little bit about that, but say, hey, let me tell you how that actually impacted me. And then if you take them through that, and you unpack what their words are, the situation, how it impacted you, that can go a little bit further.
Sort of similar to that question. So any tips and tricks for companies and leadership to help encourage emotional vulnerability or to make space for it? And sort of within that, right? Especially because, folks in the Fine Spark community are more early on in their careers, ways or strategies for having these conversations with leadership, with managers. Say people are obviously, like you just gave a great presentation, they want to take some of this back and make it a place where people can be more emotionally vulnerable. What are some tips for navigating that?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is that you have to get like a leader buy-in, or someone that in the office that can be perceived as a leader. Because usually when someone is a champion or someone understands, that has a little bit of influence in the office, when they are behind it, usually the rest of the crew gets on board with it. This can be administered and the conversation can be done through lunch and learns. There's a lot of TED Talks that are out there. There's a lot of online exercises that are out there that talks about the importance of being vulnerable. And more now, in a lot of company and corporate environments, people are providing these safe spaces for people to get together and have conversations that often are hard to have in a larger setting. So usually the settings are usually around, depending on how large the company is. In our environment, we do a lot of these lunch and learns. We talk about emotional vulnerability. We've talked about males being champions for women in the workplace. We're actually doing one on microaggressions coming up. And usually the audience is around 20 to 25 people, but we have an office that's very large. But the smaller groups tend to have really rich discussions. And that really starts to help bring in awareness. We also ask that, when we're having these discussions, for you to look for executive sponsors. That's where the buy-in from the leader comes in. And then having the leader actually communicate what's happening more on an office level. So for instance, we have meetings every morning. And so usually we'll have our leader communicate, hey, saying today, the multicultural ERG is having such and such in the conference room. I'm going to be unavailable from this time to this time because I'm supporting them. When someone's very vocal, or even it doesn't even have to be a leader, it could be you. You could say, hey, today my schedule is I have from this time to this time, we're getting together in the conference room and we're going to have a roundtable discussion on this topic. The more people talk about it, the more comfortable people are going to understand and want to be involved. And they're going to be a little curious too as well.
And this question's a bit specific about your background. So we have someone here who's in marketing, but they're interested in going into DEI, but they don't have HR experience. So they're curious about your Georgetown University DEI certificate. And if you could talk a little bit more about what you do in DEI at TEKsystems.
So this space it's a challenge. I would definitely say the space is definitely a challenge to be in. And I got into the space through, I had a piece of my job previously. So I was an internal recruiter, was one of my roles at TEKsystems. And through being an internal recruiter, part of my role I was responsible for was having a pipeline of diverse candidates and women candidates. And through that, I started to realize that the diversity recruitment strategy and game is a completely different world than just trying to recruit anybody. So through that, I had to learn how to build very strategic plans and partnerships in order to help increase my diversity pipeline. And I partnered very closely with our very small, then it was 4 people actually on a diversity team, a director and 3 managers on that team. And then I consistently did stretch assignments. I consistently volunteered my time. I was consistently asking them for feedback on how I could help, how I could bring awareness. I started up a couple of ERGs in an office that I was in Atlanta, and then an office that I was, in now in Falls Church. So I gained buy-in, and I had, my brand was very good because all the things that I was touching had something to do with the IND, everything that we had. In reference to the Georgetown program, it was 6 months and it was very, very, very intense. And it was probably one of the best things that I've ever been. I feel like I grew as an individual, as a person, just as much as a professional. It is, I think, Emily, you did the one that was in Cornell. So there is one that you can do actually virtually online, but the one at Georgetown, it requires you to be actually in the school Thursday, Friday, Saturday, once a month from 9 to 5. And you're learning about the history of diversity, inclusion. Equity is still so new. So it's not even a lot of content around equity, although we do absolutely touch it from what's out there. But the best way to get yourself involved is to, immerse yourselves in books. Jennifer Brown is a great person to kind of connect with on her website, jenniferbrown.com, or you can read some of the various books that she's had. She has a wonderful blog. She has a podcast, but also look for pieces in your current job, because I didn't have an HR background. I didn't come from HR, although talent acquisition can be a part of HR, but in our environment, it's actually very separate. But look for pieces in your current role that will allow you to have that diversity side to it. So an easy one, I've said it and I'm going to probably say it again, but the employee resource groups, a lot of companies, those roll up to the diversity team. You get involved in an employee resource groups. This is where we go for our pipeline. This is where we go when we're want people to roll out things to their local office or to their teams. We're leading and we're going straight to the employee resource group. And then to sum it up, the last thing I think you asked was, what do I do? So basically my role in a nutshell is to continue to figure out how we can build our brand and continue to attract women and people of color into our organization. So through partnerships like FindSpark, through us going to different diversity conferences, for us working on our diversity branding, those are the things that I do in my current role, along with workshops. So we do a lot of inclusion workshops in our environment as well to make sure that our employees feel as if they can be their authentic selves when they come to work every single day.
So we have another question. This is specific, but I think it's still is very much generally in line with the topic. So this question is, I'm thinking of working in the international public health / education field, but these companies often work in countries such as Ghana, and I'm gay. So any advice for how to deal with that? So basically, putting yourself in an environment where or it's more obvious, say, than others, where people might not accept or don't accept, certain pieces of your identity.
Mm-hmm. So we're an international company too, as well. And actually the gentleman who hired me 3 weeks after he hired me, TEKsystems kind of moved him to London to start up some offices there. And the first thing because I still kept up with him, he's still a mentor of mine to this day. But the first thing he said to me was he went over there with the American mindset of the business norms and cultural norms. And I'm not an expert on this topic, but the only thing that I can say is if you're thinking about doing business or trying to, work in another country outside of America, that also means Canada. So sometimes people North America, but outside of just America, the United States, you really need to do your research on their business and their cultural norms, because sometimes the vulnerability piece may not be taken very well in business settings. So it's really important for you to do your research and your homework before you try to take this outside of the States. I would say this is very specific to the United States.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And on the note of the DEI program. So as Jemia mentioned, I did get my certificate in diversity and inclusion from Cornell, and that's a 100% online course for classes over 8 weeks. It's a certificate program, and that's brought up a lot in terms of, you know, diversity and inclusion and how those play out in different countries. The United States, you know, has a lot of aspects in terms of the culture as a whole, as a country, but it's not the same in every country, and the issues are not the same, and solutions cannot always be the same. And so as young professionals and professionals in general, you know, it is something to look into and to you know, take advantage of informational interviews with folks who are, you know, currently in those roles, and that sort of, you can get a sense of whether or not it's a place where you will feel comfortable.
That was one thing they said when we started our program, like day one, they were very specific with saying, this is US, like we're not going to go global at all here because it's going to be very different. And they made sure they let us know that, hey, this is a US based kind of course, topics, things like that.
Well, it looks like we have answered all of the questions, and you all, again, you're so lucky here. You get Jemia's information, so you can follow up with her, and we will also send an email that has the slides. This will be a recording, so we'll be sending out an email once we have the recording. So please share far and wide with all of your friends who weren't lucky enough to be here in person and asking questions live. So let's give a virtual round of applause to Jemia. We've also shared in the links TEKsystems openings on the FindSpark job board. You can also meet TEKsystems at our epic networking event called Hustle Summit. The next one's coming up in New York on June 27th. And so do keep in touch with Jemia. Remember, she is giving away gift cards, so get social, engage with those social channels. You have till 3 p.m. tomorrow. I know leading these events, one of my favorite things to do is to see people's notes. So if you took notes, that's a great thing to just take a quick picture of and DM that to the Tech Careers account, share it, or, you know, share publicly your favorite takeaways with your network. You know, letting people know that you're a member of the FindSpark community and you're participating in programs like this really says a lot about the type of professional you are, and it's very positive. So definitely share that and connect with Jemia. We'll share her LinkedIn again. And Jemia, if you want to close this, wrap us up with any final words, we'd love to hear them.
I think I said enough, but I see some people over here that I want to make sure I get everyone, either Emily or Jamie, did you guys kind of notate the ones that wanted the journey line? I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Or can we save this chat for another time? Because I want to make, okay, perfect. But I will say, I will pick, like Emily said, I'm going to pick the winners on Friday. So Friday, there will be 3 winners for the Amazon gift cards. And then tomorrow, for those that did request a journey line, I will also email that information to you. That way you can take your peers and everyone through that. But I appreciate everybody for spending their evening with me. Kudos to you all for doing some professional development from 8 to 9 on a Wednesday. Like, big ups to all of you guys, and connect with me. And I would love to hear from you all. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.